And before becoming sad or worried about information you receive, verify whether the information is accurate and whether it actually concerns you. Broadening your view. To avoid the consequences of bad emotions created under such conditions, your view should be broadened to include other possibilities that could lead to the same apparent scenario. This is a very important skill. When we observe something, we often immediately select one explanation and treat it as the truth. Instead, we should ask ourselves, what other explanations could produce the same observation? Your own experiences and the knowledge available on similar experiences will be helpful in finding out the alternate scenarios that could lead to the same observations. For example, if somebody does not respond to your telephone call, you might immediately think that the person is deliberately ignoring you, but there can be many other possibilities. The person's phone may be switched off. The person may be driving. The person may be in a meeting. The battery may have died. There may be a network problem. Or the person may simply be unable to answer. At that moment, the same observation, no answer to your call, can therefore have many different explanations. Similarly, if someone sends a short message saying, "We need to talk," you might immediately become worried. But that message could relate to an ordinary matter, a work issue, a family matter, or something completely harmless. The observation is the same, but the possible explanations are different. This is why our own experience and knowledge of similar situations can be extremely valuable. In addition to acquiring knowledge through various resources, you should also develop the skills of observing and analyzing without coming to false assumptions. This means learning to distinguish between what you actually observed and what you concluded from that observation. For example, I saw my colleague talking to my former friend. That is an observation. My colleague must be talking against me. That is a conclusion. The second statement may or may not be true. Learning to recognize this difference can prevent many unnecessary emotional reactions. Recording what you discover. It is also important to maintain special notes with regard to such findings in your emotional history record, as it will help you to widen your knowledge. When you discover that an emotional reaction was caused by an incorrect assumption, record the experience. Write down what happened, what you initially believed, what emotion arose, and what you later discovered. After recording several such experiences, you may begin to notice patterns in your own thinking. You may discover, for example, that you frequently assume negative intentions when information is incomplete. Or you may notice that you tend to become frightened before checking the actual facts. Such discoveries can help you understand your own emotional behavior more clearly. It will be useful to open a dialogue with a person who carries out such observations and share information about your observation and analysis. Sometimes another person can see possibilities that we cannot see ourselves. When we are emotionally involved in an event, our thinking may become narrow. A capable and trustworthy person can ask questions that help us consider other explanations. This process will be simple if you have a spiritual friend to share information with, who can guide you. Such a person should be someone who is capable of listening carefully, willing to help, and able to guide you without unnecessarily increasing your emotional reaction. The purpose is not to tell you what to think, but to help you examine the situation more carefully. Practical steps. Considering all these factors, the following practical steps are recommended. 1. Discuss the events. Discuss the events that lead to negative emotions with a friend who is capable and willing to help. Do not simply ask someone to agree with your interpretation. Instead, ask the person to help you examine the situation objectively. You might ask, what else could have caused this? Is there information that I am missing? Am I certain about what I have assumed? Such questions can help broaden your understanding. 2. Broaden your knowledge. Broaden your knowledge with regard to the external environment and thereby identify multiple factors that could lead to the same result. The more we understand about people, situations, institutions, technology, and the environment around us, the more possibilities we can recognize. For example, understanding how social media algorithms work can help us realize that seeing many alarming posts does not necessarily mean that an event is happening everywhere. Understanding how communication works can help us realize that a delayed reply does not necessarily mean rejection. Understanding ordinary causes of sounds and movements around the home can prevent unnecessary fear. Knowledge gives us more possible explanations. 3. Widen your view before reaching a conclusion. Widen your view to accommodate all those probable possibilities before coming to a conclusion based on your beliefs. Our beliefs naturally influence how we interpret what we observe. Therefore, before deciding that something happened for a particular reason, consider whether other reasonable explanations exist. This does not mean that we should refuse to make decisions. It means that we should avoid making unnecessary emotional conclusions before sufficient information is available. 4. Develop analytical skills. Develop your analytical skills and capability to adopt logical thinking. Observe carefully. Separate facts from assumptions. Look for missing information. Consider alternative explanations. Then, after examining the available information, come to a conclusion. This approach can gradually reduce emotional reactions that arise from misunderstanding. 5. Review your emotional history. Finally, add special notes to your emotional history records and go through them again and again to identify your emotional behavior and related hidden beliefs. Your emotional history can become a valuable source of knowledge about yourself. When you repeatedly review your previous experiences, you may discover that certain types of situations repeatedly produce the same emotional reaction. You may also discover the hidden beliefs and assumptions behind those reactions. Once those patterns become visible, you have a better opportunity to examine them and replace mistaken assumptions with a more accurate understanding. Conclusion. So, acquiring relevant knowledge is not simply about collecting information. It is about learning to observe more carefully, understand situations more accurately, consider alternative possibilities, and avoid conclusions based on incomplete or erroneous information. A negative emotion may sometimes be triggered by the event itself, but in other cases, the emotion may be produced by the meaning that we have assigned to the event. When that meaning is based on a wrong assumption, discovering the actual reason can remove the power of the original trigger. Therefore, when you experience fear, anger, disgust, sorrow, or another negative emotion, pause and ask yourself, what do I actually know about this situation? What am I assuming? Could there be another explanation? And most importantly, do I have enough information before reaching this conclusion? By broadening our knowledge, improving our observation and analytical skills, recording our experiences, and discussing them with capable and trustworthy people, we can gradually understand our emotional behavior more clearly. And that understanding itself can become an important means of managing negative emotions. Thank you for listening.